Hello from Better Bee in Greenwich, New York.
Welcome to Beekeeping Today podcast.
Welcome to Beekeeping Today podcast, your source for beekeeping news, information, and entertainment presented by Better Bee. I'm Jeff Ott.
And I'm Kim Flottam.
Hey, Jeff and Kim. Today's sponsor is Global Patties. They're a family-operated business that manufactures protein supplement patties for honeybees. It's a good time to think about honeybee nutrition. Feeding your hive's protein supplement patties will ensure that they produce strong and healthy colonies by increasing brood production and overall honey flow. Now is a great time to consider what type of patty is right for your area and your honeybees. Global offers a variety of standard patties as well as custom patties to meet your needs. No matter where you are, Global is ready to serve you out of their manufacturing plants in Airdrie, Alberta, and in Butte, Montana, or from distribution depots across the continent. Visit them today at www.globalpatties.com.
Thank you, Sherry, and a quick shout out to all of our sponsors whose support allows us to bring you this podcast each week without resorting to a fee-based subscription. We don't want that, and we know you don't either. Be sure to check out all of our content on our website. There you can read up on all our guests, read our blog on the various aspects and observations about beekeeping, search for, download, and listen to over 200 past episodes, read episode transcripts, leave comments and feedback on each show, and check on podcast specials from our sponsors. You can find it all at www.beekeepingtodaypodcast.com. Thank you, Better Bee, for that fantastic opening to today's episode. And you know, folks, we couldn't have chosen a better opening because today we announce that Better Bee is the new key sponsor of Beekeeping Today podcast. I've invited Quinn Brown to the show today to talk about Better Bee and how Beekeeping Today podcast fits into their plans. Quinn, welcome to the Beekeeping Today podcast.
Hi, Jeff. It's great to be here. Thanks for having me.
Oh, totally our pleasure. Kim is sorry he couldn't make it today. He was really wanting to share this announcement with us, but he is unable to. Quinn, I'm really excited to have you here. Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself, about Better Bee, and then we'll talk about why you chose to step in as key sponsor for the podcast.
Yeah, sure. My name is Quinn Brown. As you mentioned, I'm the marketing manager here at Better Bee. I started in the fall of 2018. A lot of growth has happened here since then. One of the biggest pieces of growth is our focus on education. Mm-hmm. So in 2021, we hired on a director of research and education. We're really focused on spreading the word and helping beekeepers grow as beekeepers. A big part of Better Bee's philosophy is that a lot of our staff here are beekeepers ourselves. So in 2019, the spring after I started, I became a beekeeper. I started writing a series, The Year in the Life of a Beginning Beekeeper, for our newsletter, which if you're not getting that newsletter out there, everyone, you should be. It's chock full of great educational resources and information.
Well, I definitely agree. That's a great newsletter, and I encourage everyone to sign up and receive it. 6 years ago, when Kim and I started the podcast, we wanted to provide a reliable source of beekeeping news, information, and entertainment because there is so much noise out there for beekeepers to have to sort through. And when you're a first-year beekeeper or a second-year beekeeper and you're just getting your feet wet and your fingers stung, you have to decide what is worth listening to and what isn't. And some people go through quite a few colonies before they sort it out. And they may even get out of the hobby because they're so disappointed. And when that happens, no one wins. And that's why I'm really happy that Better Bee is there providing the education. I mean, look at your catalog. It is more than just a glossy picture catalog. There is great educational beekeeping information in it.
Yeah, so we are a full-service beekeeping supply company. So we offer all the basic supplies that beekeepers need to get started. But we realized fairly quickly that it can be very depressing for new beekeepers to lose their colonies that first winter, and that can really be a hit. And so we discovered that we needed to offer as much education as possible, not in just using the products. It's just the different methods of beekeeping that are out there and just educating our customers to be better beekeepers overall. It helps them stick with it and they thrive and they enjoy it. And in turn, that just helps the whole world. So that's a big focus for us here at Better Bee and has been growing. We've been growing that over the past few years. So
it's a great message. Beekeepers helping beekeepers.
Beekeepers serving beekeepers.
Serving beekeepers, yes. Thank you. Thank you.
But we really stick by that too. We have our customer service staff and we have beekeeping staff here, and they started a program, like a mentorship program this season. And a lot of customer service reps are heading up to the bee yards and learning about all of the products and learning about the bees and just getting to experience the high of actually beekeeping. And we really stick behind our values here. We want to educate and help people become better beekeepers.
Fantastic. Well, we are certainly happy that you chose to support us even further. You've been a long time, Better Bee's been a long time supporter of the podcast, not only Beekeeping Today podcast, but also Honeybee Obscura and 2 Million Blossoms, the podcast. And, it's exciting to have you step in as key sponsor, and we'll be talking to others from Better Bee in future episodes. And we'll even have Dr. David Peck from Better Bee joining us on an occasional series featuring different aspects of beekeeping education and even maybe some questions and answers. So we're really looking forward to that.
Back when the opportunity arose for us to establish a relationship with Beekeeping Today podcast, it just made 100% sense since our values really overlap. Both Beekeeping Today podcast and Better Bee, we have the goal of educating beekeepers with skill levels that range and offering scientific information, but also like, how do I set up my hive for the first time? How do I install a new nuke or package of bees? The basic how-tos ranging to really nitty-gritty scientific, how to use equipment, how to just like a wide range of different topics. It just makes sense to support a podcast with values that perfectly align with our own.
Yeah. Well, thank you. Thank you. We have a big show set for today. We're talking to, I think it's 6 or 7 beekeepers from around the country, all bringing their different aspects and their regional points of views. I can't think of a better wide range of topics for beekeepers other than the regional beekeepers that we start this, kick off this relationship with Better Bee, and enjoy having you on.
Thanks for having me. We're really excited to see where this relationship goes.
This episode is sponsored in part by Blue Sky Bee Supply. Check out blueskybeesupply.com for the best selection of honey containers, caps, lids, and customized honey labels. Enter coupon code PODCAST and receive 10% off an order of honey containers, caps, lids, or customized honey labels. Offer ends December 31st, 2023. Some exclusions apply. Hey, beekeepers! Many times during the year, honeybees encounter scarcity of floral sources. As good beekeepers, we feed our bees artificial diets of protein and carbohydrates to keep them going during those stressful times. What is missing, though, are key components: the good microbes necessary for a bee to digest the food and convert it into metabolic energy. Only Super DFM Honeybee by Strong Microbials can provide the necessary microbes to optimally convert the artificial diet into energy necessary for improving longevity, reproduction, immunity, and much more. Super DFM Honeybee is an all-natural probiotic supplement for your honeybees. Find it at strongmicrobials.com or at fine bee supply stores everywhere.
And while you're at the Strong Microbial site, make sure you click on and subscribe to The Hive, their regular newsletter full of interesting beekeeping facts and product updates. Hey, everybody, welcome back. Sitting around this very large virtual Zoom table right now are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and not including myself, beekeepers here here on our seasonal Regional Beekeepers panel discussion. So welcome, guys, to the podcast.
Good to be on.
Thanks for having us.
Hello.
Hello. Thanks for having us. It's great to be back.
Hi, Jeff. Thanks for having us.
So sitting around the virtual table right now, and we'll just go around the table with names first, and then we're going to get in-depth discussion with all these guys. And I'll let them tell you where they are. But we have Tracy Alarcon, we have Ed Colby, we have Paul Longwell, we have Rainier Eich, we have Jay Williams, we have Duane Combs, and Mark Smith. Did I get that all right? Oh, goodness gracious. The old age brain cells haven't hit me yet, or left me. I'm not sure which one it is. Gentlemen, we are here to discuss the season just passed, which is the winter of 22-23, the springtime, and now what you're looking forward to this coming summer. So last time we started from west to east. Let's go from east to west. And our newest member of the panel discussion here is Rainier Eich. Rainier, welcome to the regional panel discussion. Thank you for reaching out and volunteering to join us. Why don't you tell us who you are, where you are, number of bees, etc.
Thanks for having me on, Jeff. I've been listening for years. Really excited to be on here. I live in Mid-Coast, Maine, so I'm about an hour north of Portland, Maine. And I currently have 13 hives. And so last winter I had 18 in the fall, and I took 5 losses. 3 of them were like during the winter, and then the other 2, one happened because they were queenless, so I combined them this spring. And then the other one happened because I think that so many bees died that it blocked the entrance, and I decided to go without upper entrances this year. So they weren't able to get outside, and so they pooped inside the hive. And they just kind of fizzled out. They're pretty small. But I've got 13 right now. It was a very warm fall and a very warm winter until like March. It seemed like the season flipped because it was pretty warm for our winter and fall. But then once we hit March, it got back kind of cooler again. And so kind of dragged on till these last week or two. And we've finally turned a corner. So we're getting days in the 60s and low 70s. Frost last night, actually, but that'll probably be the last one of the year.
You have 13 colonies. What kind of bees are you keeping?
So they're kind of mutts. I want to work more towards like a Carniolan or a Russian, smaller cluster, eat less food, but pretty much a little bit of everything right now.
How's the Varroa situation there where you are?
It's pretty challenging because our winter bees are made sometimes even in August into for sure by September. And so we really have to deal with those mite levels in the midsummer. So as soon as I pull off the honey around the 4th of July, I'm really testing all my hives and testing them every 2 weeks or so during the mid part of the summer. And so I'll use formic acid, and that works pretty well for me. I haven't lost very many queens. I've got high mite kill. And then I do oxalic in mid-November when the hives are broodless. So
what's your spring situation looking like?
As I mentioned a little bit before, winter kind of dragged into March and April. We typically get our first inspection around mid-April here. And I got in on the 16th after I got back from a trip. And the hives were looking okay. I wasn't amazed by it, but they built up steadily over the past, month roughly. And yesterday they looked beautiful. I checked out an apiary. They're building up. They have like 5 or 6 frames of brood at least. And the honey flow is starting here. So they're looking pretty good. And I'm going to graft on Monday next week. So
what are your goals for the summer?
My goal is to go from 13 hives to 25 hives and 5 nukes. And then I think my goal is 300 pounds of honey as well and selling 40 queens. So
thank you, Rainier. What we're going to do is we're just going to move on quickly down the interstate. It's not
95.
5, that's here. 95, yeah. Let's head on that down 95. Let's talk to Mark Smith down in the Carolinas. Mark, we missed you last fall. You were busy last fall.
Last year was a earth-shattering, eye-opening experience. So yeah, I missed the last podcast because I had not had much time to do any bees. But first, let me thank you for inviting me back to be on a podcast among such distinguished beekeepers. So I really appreciate it. But yeah, I'm glad to be back. Okay, well, my little operation is called Flat Woods Bee Farm, located in Locust, North Carolina. That's, just so you can see it on a map, that's about 35 miles east of Charlotte. I'm kind of the odd one in the bunch. I am a chemical-free beekeeper, meaning I don't use any chemicals to control any disease, pest in any of my colonies. So now let's talk about what happened last year. last year was the first big production year for a cut flower farm that I started. And I quickly learned what one man can do in the course of a day. So, unfortunately, what had to take a back seat was the bees. And literally from May the 5th last year to the middle of December, I didn't go in my bees. I just physically could not do it. Obviously, my losses last year were heavy. I lost 80% of what I had. I like to think that most of that is swarmed to death, and most of them swarmed to death. So the feral colony or feral population in my area should be booming. But, it is what it is. There's not much I could do about it. And another thing, I try to stay positive. That was a stress test for how I keep bees. My chemical-free management program really showed me that I could do it under really tough circumstances. So I lost 80%, but that's okay. A little bit about this year so far. And I know Kim does a blog about global warming and climate change and stuff. Third week of December last year, we had red maple blooming in Locust. Now, where I live, there's two varieties of red maple, I think, because one blooms first, the other one blooms second. The second bloom was the end of January. So red maple was completely bloomed out by the end of January. And as most of you know, that's a huge pollen source and early nectar source. So that kind of stimulates the colonies to start brooding up and getting ready for spring flow. Well, I had early pollen, so everything started brooding up, and it's been a challenge to keep what bees I have left in the colonies. Now, what I have done to date is the losses that I took last year, I have almost recuperated half of that from splitting, swarms, and all that kind of stuff. The early brood up made the colonies huge. And with trying to split as much as I can to get my numbers back up, that was a good thing. So nature's kind of helping me out, even though sometimes early brood ups means early swarms, but it also means that you can start splitting earlier. So that's what I was trying to do.
Are you doing walkway splits with those, or are you bringing in queens?
Thank you for asking. I don't bring any bees inside my operation. Everything I raise are my bees. And I've been like that since 2011. The last bee I purchased was a queen in 2011. Everything else is my local survivor stock that I raised myself. And so far have not been beeless. I've never lost everything and had to completely start over. So far, our flow here where I'm at in North Carolina has been great. As long as we can keep some moisture in the ground, the bees are really putting back the nectar. Obviously, with me splitting as much as I am, I'm not going to make a lot of honey. But it's what I am raising, they have plenty to eat, okay? And continuing into the summer, I'm real big on summer splits. And as we get closer to the summer solstice, I hope that I can surpass going over 50%, building back up my operation.
I have to ask, the cut flower, is that you have someone else handling that this year?
I am a one-man operation. Drink a lot of water and let your beard grow, and it gets whiter every day. Of course, these people can't see that. But
it is white. Yes, it is. You're going to be challenging Kim for whiteness here real soon.
Right. But we're very optimistic this year. Last year, we learned a lot of lessons. Life and beekeeping teaches us a lot of lessons. And hopefully, coming out of that, we'll be a better beekeeper.
Well, let's jump in the cars and we'll go up here to Northeast Ohio to Tracy Alarcon. Tracy has been with us on the Regional Beekeepers, I think, from the beginning. So how's it going there near Youngstown, Ohio there, Tracy?
Hi, Jeff. Thanks for having me again. And yes, I was one of the ones that was asked from the beginning. For those of you that are new to the podcast, my name's Tracy Alarcon. I live in Northeast Ohio. I live basically halfway between the cities of Akron and Youngstown, right off of I-76, if anybody cares to look at a map. I'm an EAS master beekeeper. I've served as my county apiary inspector for like 7 years. I've been involved in different queen rearing programs and co-ops and taught a lot of queen rearing classes and made a lot of splits. And then I stopped doing it all. I just wanted to be a beekeeper. For me, last year, a year ago, February, I slipped on a bunch of ice out here and fell and tore my rotator cuff. And so I wasn't really able to keep bees last year. I mean, I went out a couple of times with my few colonies that survived over the winter, but I wasn't able to do my normal activity, trying to open up a colony, remove frames, and remove honey in boxes with one arm is a very difficult thing to do. So I had a huge loss over the winter. I ended up with just one colony over the winter. And that one colony is really strong and doing really well. So, but that's part of the deal. I wasn't able to do my normal mite control. And for me, my normal mite control, if we start, like Rainier mentioned, I do an oxalic acid treatment between Thanksgiving and Christmas when my colonies are broodless. And I was able to do that last year. But then the other big part of my varroa management is in the summertime, around the summer solstice, as Mark mentioned, is to make splits. And I raise my own queens, and then I make a bunch of splits. And at that time, when the colonies go broodless, I can do another oxalic acid vaporization treatment. And, we've had our spring flow. I'm able to split all those bees down and then have, young, vigorous, well-mated queens in the summer, getting ready to go into winter. And then depending on how strong I make the splits, I can usually get a honey crop. But last year I didn't do any of that. I just crossed my fingers and hoped that some of them survived, and one did. For us here, as Rainier mentioned, I mean, our winter was actually very warm as winters go. Normally we have plenty of snow and cold days, and we had a very mild, wet winter. And a lot of people were still feeding their bees out here, and people were having swarms in early March. We had red maples bloom early, but then in typical Northeast Ohio fashion, we had 80-degree days for a week, and then it all went down to freezing. So a lot of people lost a lot of colonies because they brooded up really quick, and then they had a lot of chilled brood, and a lot of bees died because, as we know, going into spring, a lot of those bees are still our winter bees that are trying to raise brood, and that's probably the hardest thing that they do. So spring so far, dandelions, even with all the ups and downs, you can almost always, the one thing you can count on here is that dandelions bloom somewhere around the second week of April. And all things considered, that's exactly what happened again. I went into my one colony about a week ago, and I run all mediums. And because I didn't harvest any honey and all I did was add boxes, it's like 6 mediums, 10 frames high, and it's just booming. I didn't see any signs of swarming. Didn't have, I had the queen cups, but no queen cells. So they weren't trying to raise any queens, which is great, which is one of the things that in the past I've propagated queens for, is to help mitigate the swarming. But I figure in another week or two, I'm going to do some grafting and build my numbers back up. Years ago, I listened to a talk by a queen producer here in Ohio, Dr. Joe Latshaw, and he had done an SARE, Sustainable Agricultural Research Experiment, I think it is. I forget what SARE stands for, but he took at summer solstice and made 1 frame splits, 1 frame of bees and brood and a queen cell, put them in a styrofoam nuke, and to see if they would overwinter in Ohio. And he made 40 of them, and 36 of them made it through winter. And so since I heard that talk back in, 2006, 2008, somewhere way back then, I've done a lot of that. And it's amazing. You have to feed them, and you have to feed them pollen, and you have to feed them sugar. But it's amazing that if you do that around the summer solstice, that you can have a strong enough colony that'll make it through winter. So that's my plan for the summer. I'm not planning on trying to get any honey going on this year. I'm going to try to stay healthy this year so that I can still work my bees. But that's kind of where I am and what my winter was like and what spring is so far.
It's a good theme. Keep healthy this season. Hey, while we're on our way out to or down to Tennessee to our next beekeeper, let's take this quick break and we'll be right back. And we'll be near Nashville. Hold on.
We know you have options when it comes to shopping for beekeeping supplies. What we believe sets Better Bee apart are 3 things. First, our commitment to innovating, trying out new products in our own apiaries, and then sharing them with you. Second, our focus on education and helpful customer service. And third but not last, our fundamental company goal, to help you be a successful beekeeper. Give us a call to learn more about any of our products or to ask a beekeeping question. We've got you covered. Visit betterbee.com to shop online today.
I just saw that sign. Welcome to Nashville. Jay must be around here. Hey, Jay, how are you doing?
I'm doing great, thanks. I just went to Boot Barn and got myself a new set of boots, so I'm happy to be here today. I'm going to be kicking it.
I know that place. I know it well. There you go.
Haven't been to Nashville till you went to Boot Barn. Thanks for having me again. I'm very lucky to be here with such awesome beekeepers, so I appreciate you letting me sit at the table. Even if you got to put me at the kids' table, I'm happy to be here.
Well, you have to start somewhere, buddy.
My name is Jay Williams. Like Jeff said, I'm just south of Nashville in a little town called Franklin, Tennessee. I manage around, depending on the year, between 150 and 200 colonies. I raise queens and I sell nukes, and I also dabble in artificial insemination. And I work a lot in agritourism. So I do a lot of tours, do a lot of speaking, and then honey tastings, believe it or not. I'm having a really good time lately. There is a massive outflowing of support from the public. They want to know more. They want to experience the bees as much as possible. So it's keeping me really busy this year. And it's been really, really fun. If we'll activate the trust tree, I will tell you my winter losses. Hopefully this is a safe space. This year, it was high. I lost 15%. I like to say I try and keep my losses around 5%, but I lost 15%. And that is high. Primarily, it's probably my fault. I raise carnies. I really like carniones. I like the dark bee. They overwinter pretty small, and I fed them probably more than I should have. And this year, at least in my area, like everybody else has said, the winter was fairly warm. And then all of a sudden, out of nowhere, February, it was just brutal. It was not what we're used to at all. And so my brood clusters have gotten a little bit too big because I've been feeding them too much, and life got in the way, and I didn't keep on top of things. And unfortunately, some bees starved. So it was a tough one. Those cold snaps really kind of keep you humble and keep you trying to do a little bit better. But this spring has been just absolutely wild swings where it's been super cold and then super warm the next day, 80 degrees. And so the queen rearing has been really tough, honestly. In the beginning of or end of March, beginning of April was really not what I'm used to. And these parts, they call it a hitch in your giddy up. So I've had a little bit of a hitch in my giddy up getting the breeding going, but we'll get there. The main flow for us is usually, or the main, the activation of the honey flow is the locust. And the locust has been a bust this year. I think the temperature swings really hit us hard. However, it's really fascinating because at least in my area, like the red bud is massive. The bottlebrush buckeye is just this it's like that, all of a sudden out of nowhere, the thing is just taken over. So typically in the beginning of the season, I'd say beginning of April, I'll do double screen splits on all my overwintered strong colonies. And so I'll take the old queen, stick her above, and usually it's when they're really crowded, they're starting to throw swarm cells everywhere, and I'll let them raise their own swarm cell, get that out of their system, marry them up, or reevaluate the queen. Well, this year, because I was saying that the winter was, the weather was a little weird, a lot of my early season swarms didn't really take. It didn't really work. But as a result, I made a ton of honey. I mean, ridiculous amount of honey for what I'm used to this time of year. Usually around, last week or so, beginning of May is when the locust will turn on and the flow's really going. And I'd be on my, maybe second super. I'm on my fourth or fifth super right now of honey. So it's been an epic year honey-wise, but not necessarily yet for the queen breeding. That just kind of started. We probably made 60 splits in the last couple weeks here. So it's like ramping up right away. And this is one of in my opinion, it's like a typical spring where nothing happens. And you're like, I got all the time in the world. And all of a sudden you look back and like, oh, bleep, like I'm like behind on everything. And, there's swarm cells everywhere and all the queens are going. So it's been really fun. That's why I'm addicted to this hobby, because it's always keeping you on your toes. Man, every single season is different. I'm worried about the taste of our honey this year, honestly. The locust for us is usually that main flow, like I said. And so the beginning of the taste of my honey is usually super sweet. It's a big kick right in the beginning. And since we don't have that, I think we're going to have a milder beginning. And maybe hopefully we'll have our basswood at the end of our season, and we'll have clover and stuff in the middle. But usually the kind of wow factor or my secret sauce is the locust, and I don't have that this year. So I'm really going to be interested to see how it turns out and what the response from the public's going to be. We're all talking about varroa control. I'm fairly similar with everybody else. I usually do oxalic acid treatment in December or January 1st, typically when they're most broodless. I monitor whenever I can, once a month, usually throughout the entire season, if I can get in there in the wintertime. But my numbers this year, I dropped the threshold. So I'm at 1.5% is when I treat. Usually in years past, I've been a little bit higher. So I've adjusted that based on a lot of the recent kind of feedback from a lot of people out there. So I've changed my threshold. I'm still sticking with oxalic acid, like I said, over the winter. And then typically we'll kind of mess around with some formic acid if I need to. And then if there is a problem in the middle of summer after the honey comes off, I'll use Apigard. But hopefully I won't have to use any of that. I only treat if I have to. But it's been really fun. I'm looking forward to this summer. My big plans is I finally got a seat at the American Honey Tasting Society's Honey Sommelier School. So I will be going to Marina's school in June and hopefully get my certificate one day in a few years. So that's what I have on the radar. I'm excited.
And for the listeners who aren't familiar with Marina Marchese, she is the honey sommelier. We've had her on the podcast a couple times. Feel free to do a search for Marina on the podcast to learn more. Well, thanks, Jay. Yeah, you were up in the Pacific Northwest this last summer, too.
With Sue Colby.
Yeah, Whidbey Island. Yeah, very
It's
good.
Great.
Well, we'll talk to you about that in a few moments. Let's pack it up and head on out to Colorado and talk to Mr. Ed Colby.
So this is Ed Colby here in western Colorado. I'm right kind of in the middle of the state at the western edge of the Rocky Mountains at about 5,500 feet, although I do keep bees up in the high country as well. I keep about 70 colonies, give or take. We had a wet winter here, a record snow, not particularly cold, but the cold weather hung around for a long time until a couple of weeks ago. Actually, we were having very hard freezes, but it kind of looks like clear sailing now. The mites had their way with some of my colonies last fall. That was my fault for not keeping up on treatment. I did give them an oxalic acid treatment in late November or early December. But when you've had mite counts of 20 or 30 or 40 or even 50 mites, and sometimes you can bring those numbers down and the hive looks like it's doing okay, but it's usually not. When I lost 10 of 70 colonies over the winter, it appears that the losses were strongly correlated to high mite counts in the fall, even though those were hives that I hope might make it through the winter. And a few of those high mite count hives did make it through the winter. Well, nothing goes according to plan in life, and especially in beekeeping. And as I was telling a couple of you guys earlier, Marilyn broke her pelvis, so that's been keeping me homebound, taking care of her. And I haven't been able to get the queens that I customarily get in the spring. I've gotten some, but not all of them. So what I've been doing is making walkaway splits, and I'm doing this in a new way for me. What I used to do is I make these splits, and with walkaway splits, I don't care which half has the queen. I just split them, and one half will make a queen, and the other half already has one. But what I would do is separate those splits so that the bees wouldn't all go back into one of the splits. Well, I got this idea from this guy named Charles Linder in the American Bee Journal. He's a commercial guy he's talking about 4-way pallets, which I don't use. But here's his idea. You don't have to do this. And you don't have to fuss around and figure out which split has all the unsealed brood and all that stuff. I don't have time for that. So what I did was I took the two splits, and let's say the highest facing south. I took the two splits. I put one facing east, one facing west, put them right back to back. And so because they're in the exact position of where the mother hive was, the original 2-high hive, the bees come back and they got to make a choice. They got to go into one split or the other. So what I did was, and this is all experimental at this point, but I cracked the lids back just, I don't know, quarter, half an inch, something like that. So that now they have, as they come back, The landing boards are facing in a different direction. That's their old familiar way of getting back to the hive. But they're going back into these hives. They're deciding which one to go into, because there's a split. There's an opening at the top of the hives. The hives are right together. And so far, it's working pretty well. They tend to go about 50-50 into each of these. So this is saving me a lot of work from having to haul these splits to different yards. So that's the big news here. My goal this summer is to put bees in locations that historically have had less of a mite problem than others. I have places that are terrible for mites, and I have places that aren't so bad. So I'm trying to go with the current here, and because mites is what it's all about for me. So I'm hoping to be more diligent in monitoring the summer, and also to harvest my honey early in mid-August when there's still a honey flow. That's an opportunity for me to treat colonies that need it. So, and if the bees continue to bring in honey, they can certainly put it in the brood nest, and that'll just make it a little easier for me as far as feeding going into the winter. So I got my fingers crossed, and I think everything's going to go really well this summer. But
Well, thank you, Ed. Let's head on directly west. Let's go to Phoenix, Arizona, where it's nice and cool today.
Hi, Jeff. Go Better Bee. It's great being with you here today. It is a little warm today, but we've had a great year so far. In the desert, it's all about water, and our reservoirs were down to about 33% full, and we've gotten so much rain this winter and spring that they anticipate they'll be up to 60% capacity. Now, what this rain has caused is what we call a super bloom. You go out and look at any field that hasn't been plowed in the last year, and it was covered with yellow from weeds. And now all of the paloverdes and the mesquite trees are blooming and the cactuses are blooming, and we're having an incredible year. I've got 90 hives right now. That's 60 doubles, 20 singles, and 10 nukes. Give you an idea of how good it's been out here. I started helping new beekeepers and renting equipment to them. And I had a guy in Cave Creek that we installed a nuke into a 10-frame box with 5 frames from the nuke and 5 built-out hives on March 25th. It weighed 50 pounds. By April 22nd, we had to put a second box on with 10 frames of heavily waxed frames, and it weighed 100 pounds. And when I checked it last Saturday, he's ready for a third box, and we had to pull out a couple frames of completely capped honey in order to make room to give the bees something to work on until he got the third box on. So, and it's up to 150 pounds. So that's 100-pound growth in 6 weeks.
Duane, that sounds really great. And you're profiting, I shouldn't say profiting, but the bees are profiting from all the bloom. But I let you get going, and I didn't ask you to say who you were.
Okay.
And your background in bees. You've been on the podcast in the past, but I want to make sure that for today's listeners, you are known.
Duane Combs. I'm a master beekeeper from an alumni of Montana, as is Jeff. I own Arizona Beekeepers, LLC. We sell nukes and honey. This spring, I sold 170 nukes. We expect an incredible honey crop because I'm always growing bees. I don't get a lot of honey, but this year I will. But my year is almost over because as we get into the summer, it becomes survival for the bees, especially if we don't get more rain. We're expected to have a typical dry summer and then a wet fall. So I'll be trying to keep bees alive for the next June, July, and August, and then we'll get back into the bee business with the rest of you.
Thank you, Duane. Let's head on up to the Pacific Northwest to a neighbor of mine. Paul, let's talk to you about your beekeeping.
Okay, I'm Paul Longwell. I'm a master beekeeper alumni from the University of Montana, just like Duane and Jeff is. I live about probably about 10 miles from Jeff. Olympia, Washington is about 40 miles south of Seattle, Washington. I started the winter with 17 hives. I lost 5, and I take that to Varroa and Yellow Jackets. So hopefully I'll be able to do better this year. My summer plans are to regrow my hives back up to, I would like to get them up to 25 eventually, but take it a little bit slower. Done Varroa changes a little bit different. This year, I took the hives that survived and I've moved them out to outyards, divided them into outyards, because what I want to do is I want the drones from those hives to help my new bees that I'm bringing in. So I know what I'm getting out there in the DCAs around me. So I've got them situated in about a mile curve around me. And then I brought in some VHS bees like Jeff did. So hopefully we'll have a little bit of better Varroa control. And I've also put a written plan together for Varroa control to make sure that I stick to it. Because like all you guys, life gets in the way. And you're helping somebody else down the road with their hive, but you forget to do yours when you get back. So that was what killed most of my hive was Varroa this year. Our spring this year is late. In fact, it's just starting for the apple trees and everything to bloom this year. Because of that, Jeff can tell you, we only got our packages 2 weeks ago. And so they're in the phase of just being releasing the queens and starting the rebuild. So that's what's going on now.
And what are your plans for the summer?
Just rebuild my hives and make sure that I'm spending time on my hives instead of somebody else's hives.
Oh, I get the hint. Okay, I'm not allowed to call you anymore. All right, I got you. I hear it. That's right. That's right. I hear you. I hear you.
My problem is I like to, and I have too many mentors. So it's passing them off and not mentoring as many people. Or if they have a question, send me a photo or something and I'll answer it in the evening. But I'm not going to be driving to your house to take care of it or treat your hives for you instead. So more attention to what I'm doing.
Well, thanks, guys. So let's open this up to a general discussion. Hopefully you've been taking notes and you might have a question for one beekeeper to another better than I could ask a question. Tracy, I see you have your hand up there.
Yeah, I mean, in the past, I brought in a bunch of VSH bees, and I was just wondering who you got your VSH stock from.
They were from Ortiz. They're the sassafras.
You mean the sassafras?
Jeff and I call them
sassafras hybrids.
Okay.
It's easier to say.
I'm getting in some virgins from Corey Stevens on the 23rd. Like I made a group order with everyone. And have you guys tried any of Corey's queens?
Corey Stevens is with the Russian Queen Breeders Association, correct?
No, he's independent. He's breeding his own kind of Italian-ish line.
Yeah, I'm not familiar with him at all.
I haven't used any of his bees, but I've been bringing in Pole Line Plus bees from Louisiana.
The Pole Line's supposed to be really good as well.
Yeah, I had a guest on my YouTube channel last week. She buys all Pauline queens into San Antonio because they have so many Africanized drones. So she makes a queen bank and sells it to everyone around.
So Jay, last time we talked, or when we talked to you on the show, you were working with South Hall, or is it South Hill?
South Hall, yeah. You like to call it South Hill. Yeah, you can call it whatever you want.
the South Place.
Yeah, the South Place, Resort of the South.
Yeah.
South Hall is going great. That's really where I'm doing all the agritourism. And we're probably doing, I don't know, four or five tours a week at least right now. And we do honey tastings every other weekend. And almost everyone sells out. So there's been a great support from the public and it's been really fun. So I can't wait to see where it goes. We have a lot of really cool things in the works and plans for future development. So it's really been a blessing to be a part of a farm-based resort that cares a lot about quality and knows that it takes time to create good stuff. And, we're up to 7 apiaries on this property and we've really spent time positioning them correctly. And, we talked a little bit about DCAs. We have our own DCA that I was able to find flying my own drone quadcopter, which is quite comical to do. And then we've sort of set up a 4-to-1 ratio for production or colony to one drone producer to make sure we're flooding the area, just like we've been talking about with our good stock, and then doing our own artificial insemination on property in addition to the grafting. So
our discussion with you and the agritourism and what you're doing there with South Hall, it sounds really exciting. I think that's really kind of a model for any beekeeper who really wants to take their beekeeping experience to the next level with the general public. I think is a really cool thing what you're doing there.
There's something about putting a stranger or, someone from the public in a bee suit and then convincing them a half an hour after they meet you for the first time to take their glove off, stick their finger in the honeycomb and taste it right out of the hive. They never forget it. It's really fun. And we do something too where we grab a drone. The trick where you grab a drone and you hold it by the wings and you hand it a queen cork and it'll juggle. You ever seen that or done it? Check it out. It's cool. But you can literally make a bee juggle and they will never forget that experience. And we do that literally every week right now and have a great time doing it. And we charge for it. It's not free. So imagine that. It's fun.
I've got a question. Paul talked about committing time helping newbies. And, I got into the nuke selling business and all this because I wanted to help new beekeepers. But I've not found a great model yet. We've set up a Facebook page staffed by experts that answer their questions. I'm president of our local bee club, and we have field days for these people. What other sorts of things are other people trying to help new beekeepers, but not spend your whole life running around helping new beekeepers?
Well, when you find that out, let me know, because I failed miserably at that. The only way that I ended up being able to help people and still maintain my sanity was to start a business and charge for it. Because otherwise you're spending, like Paul mentioned, you're spending your whole day running around taking care of other people's bees, and your bees are not being taken care of. And as an inspector, that was part of my job. I was going to everybody's colonies and inspecting, but just as a president of an association, just as a mentor, it can run you ragged. And the only other way that I found that helped me was I held field days in my own bee yard at one time. And so if you wanted to learn, you came to my colonies where I had, 30, 40, 50 at a time where we could inspect versus their one or two. So that helped save me a lot of travel.
There are some beekeepers I've seen where they have their group sessions for 5 to 10 beekeepers, and that's one price. And then they set up another one to their personal bee coaching, and that's at a higher price.
What typically are they charging for personal service?
Well, I charged $60 an hour plus IRS mileage round trip. And the time included whatever time it took me to drive to and from your apiary is what I charge.
Here's a suggestion for you guys, and it's worked pretty well in Nashville. About a year and a half ago now, I was in the same situation where I couldn't drive all over the place. I didn't have the time. I wanted to help people, but I really just couldn't. There wasn't enough to go around. So I started a text messaging service. And I think everybody could do this in your own regions where you're from, where it's a paid service, but it's $4 a month. It's not ridiculous. And all I would do, and this is primarily for all the new beekeepers that would come on to my schools and kind of join in the service, all I would do is text the group what I was doing that time of the season or the month or whatever. So I would say, hey, heads up, I'm noticing my Varroa numbers are going up. You might want to check yours. Or heads up, I just switched to a screened inner cover. Or, I just pulled out the tray underneath my screen bottom board. You may want to consider doing the same. And I kind of stayed ahead of those questions. So I knew all right, we're coming out of the season. It's going to start to warm up. You should consider, checking to make sure your hives aren't honeybound. That's what's happening right now, actually, in our area. You may want to consider doing the same. And by staying ahead of that, I had less questions or less people saying, hey, can you help me? Because they were checking that their hives weren't honeybound before it actually happened. And it was pretty easy. And a lot of this stuff, I don't do the day of. I pre-write it, a week ahead of time or whatever to try and stay on top of things. And I batch it so that it's automated and it goes out. But I would encourage anybody to start that in your group or your club or whatever. Hey, this is what I'm doing. You may want to consider the same thing, because you're right. There's only one of you and you really can't go everywhere all the time. So you might as well try and scale or multiply yourself. And the easiest way to do it is an automated system like that. Just an idea.
It's a good idea.
What I like is I just went down to the Portland Bee Club in their club apiary, they had Dewey Carlton there from the Oregon Master Beekeeping Program, and he was teaching the whole club, what to look for in diseases, and he actually had samples of BFB and AFB and everything else. But what the club's done is they've got a group of about 10 people that they call the tech team, who have more and more advanced training. And so what the mode of operation for them is, somebody will contact them by text or email saying, hey, I have a problem with my hive or something like that. They'll communicate basically by email or text, send them a form, have them fill it out. Once they figure out, the standard stuff, it's not this, it's not this, they'll send one person out from the team on a pre-arranged appointment to check their bees for them. So you have 10 people doing something instead of one person trying to take care of 30 people, which really worked really good for their club.
Is that a free service, or do they charge for that?
What they do is they have a kit, and they carry the kits, the AFB and the EFB kits and that. But what they'll do is they'll charge them for the cost of the kit if they actually need to use them for a test.
But to subscribe to the service does not cost the beekeeper.
No cost for the club. It's part of being in the club.
And so the tech team does not get reimbursed for their time and energy of going out to someone's colony?
That's up there individual, what they arrange.
One way that I found to really help newer beekeepers, I've already mentored 2 people for the last 2 years, is you can send them YouTube videos. Like, they're great YouTubers like Cayman Reynolds, Bob Binney, many others. But if they start watching YouTube, they can, from those creators, they can kind of pick up knowledge so they know what to do when they see stuff in the hive. And so they won't always be asking you for help. That's one thing I found.
Yeah, send them reliable resources such as the YouTubers that are good. And then also you have Bee Informed Partnership and Honeybee Health Coalition, and even the local state ag extension services are always great resources for those folks.
Definitely.
I have a mentee who is getting so good that she started bossing me around out there in the bee yard and telling me what to do. I had to tell her to cool it. But I was the beekeeper, and I was bringing her along to teach. Anyhow, she's great, but she is a little bossy. But I do have one quick story for the coolest thing that happened beekeeping this year to me was I have some really old equipment, and I have some old telescoping hive covers. They came out of a junk pile over at my friend Paul Longwell's. They're really old. Well, I'll get to that. So they've got a sheet metal top, and then there's a wooden frame inside. Well, this one is completely coming apart. So I thought, I'm going to save that piece of sheet metal. So I'm just going to knock the wood off this thing. Well, I start knocking it off, and guess what? There's insulation in there. And the insulation is newspaper. So as soon as I see the newspaper, I think, I'm going to see how old this goes, how far back this goes. April 1st, 1934. That's how old my hive cover was. And wow. It's legible. It's the Denver Post. I got the comics. I got the classifieds. Okay, so here's the difference between today and yesterday. So there's a lot of Lonely Hearts stuff in there, and ads for psychics, for unfortunate girls who may need some temporary shelter. And these just very blunt pleas. This is nothing like Tinder. Trust me. But my favorite one was, refined woman, 29, owns nice farm, will marry. Anyhow, that's the way. And that was during the Depression. So, but I did not see any ads for bees for sale.
Interesting. All right. Well, I think on that note,
there's your story for the day.
Yeah, on that note, I think, gentlemen, I appreciate your time this afternoon, and I know our listeners will have enjoyed listening to how you're managing your bees. It seems like Varroa are the topic of the day, which we all know is the case, but misery loves company, and it's good to hear that other people are feeling the same pain as we're having. For whatever reason that is, that seems to be the case wherever. I look forward to having you back in the fall. And I wish the best for you this coming summer and honey season. Y'all take care now.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thanks for having us, Jeff.
Okay.
Nice listening to you guys.
Thanks.
Good talking with all of you. Have a good summer for you guys. Stay cool for us guys.
Well, that about wraps it up for this episode. Before we go, I want to encourage our listeners to rate us 5 stars on Apple Podcast or wherever you download and stream the show. Even better, write a review and let other beekeepers looking for a new podcast know what you like. You can get there directly from our website by clicking on the reviews along the top of any web page. We want to thank our regular episode sponsors, Global Patties, Strong Microbials, and Better Bee for their longtime support of this podcast. Thanks to Blue Sky Bee Supply and Northern Bee Books for their generous support. Finally, and most importantly, we want to thank you, the Beekeeping Today podcast listener, for joining us on this show. Feel free to leave us questions and comments at Leave a Comment section under each episode on the website. We'd love to hear from you. Thanks a lot, everybody.